Boom. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Charlie Turnbull. This is, what is this? This is the Academy of Cheese, talking cheese in conversation with Tim Jones, one of, and I'm not overrating this, bit of a legend in the industry, sort of forefront of the British renaissance of cheese making. You've been making cheese for 28 years?
9 years this year. I lose track. 29 years. 1992 we started. Yeah. So
and it's
still new boys.
Just new boys. So 1992, I mean, that really was in that first wave of cheesemakers. You are the Britpop of cheese, basically.
I don't know about that, but we certainly feel we were lucky. The timing was really good because we were there were obviously people doing it before us, but we were one of the earlier of the sort of new breed of cheesemakers, of which there are now, thankfully, many more. And, hopefully in the coming years, we'll get even more. So, exciting.
You can be modest about it, but you were doing what no one else was doing and was thought to be slightly nuts. And most people in your position were being driven to it because they didn't have the quota or they were going bust or something like that.
Well, we were nuts partly because we were in the east of the country and nobody makes cheese in the east, really. And I think it happened because my brother Simon came back from agricultural college, joined a very successful dairy arable farm, and there wasn't much for him to do. So my father just said to him, "Look, boy, get out and go and do something different and interesting." So he went and researched making cheese and started in a tiny way, and things have changed a lot in the interim.
So with 1992, Simon kicks off. When do you get involved?
So as dull story, but we as kids, Simon was always the farmer's son out with Dad, rough and tumble, all doing that, and I was the dull one at home, and went off and got an economics degree. Went and worked in London as a marketing exec, whatever. And then Dad phoned me up, and I had no plans to come back to Lincolnshire, really. The thought horrified me. But then I was just getting into my mid-late 20s. I had a longish term girlfriend, and he said, come back and help sell this cheese. We've got something quite exciting. And it felt like a bit of a punt, but looked quite exciting as well. And I bit his and my brother's hand off and moved back. So that was in 2000, so 21 years ago. More on the marketing side, although I go in the dairy and help every day, and I make the butter 3 times a week. But it's good having a farmer and having a non-farmer. So you've got the farm. I think if we both were interested in farming, we both fight like hell about cows and tractors, but we fight about other stuff, but not those things. So I think
not cows and tractors.
Our skills, we're different personalities, and our skills are different. So the business has room for a farmer and a spreadsheet guy, and we sort of meet in the middle, and we both help in the dairy as well. So it is oddly symbiotic.
Well, amazing. So let's delve into the cheese. It's a great name. Let's be honest. Lincolnshire Poacher sort of nails it. Says where you come from. Instantly recognizable. Everyone could call it the poacher. So that was very clever. Was that your marketing skills coming in, or?
I'd love to sit here and say yes. It wasn't. It was my old man. So I was still at university when they started making the cheese. Came back one weekend for a weekend off, whatever, and they'd made this cheese. They didn't know what to call it, and then Dad just had this light bulb moment because they were going, "What, Lincolnshire cheddar? No, that's wrong," and loads of names, and he just Lincolnshire Poacher. That's it. It was a proper light bulb moment, and it's because of there's a Lincolnshire Poacher song that I won't sing because you'd run a mile from me. But
no, go on. I want to hear it. Come on. What's the song? Go on.
Can't sing it, but it was my delight on a shiny night in the season of the year. And actually, every county had the song for their own county, same words, but for their county. But Lincolnshire, it sort of carried it on. So locally, people know of the Lincolnshire Poacher song, and there are a couple of pubs called the Lincolnshire Poacher, so it seemed appropriate. Yeah. And we poached the name, which is appropriate, I suppose, as well. The name is really good, and it traveled. What's funny about the name is it feels, if someone doesn't know where Lincolnshire is, if you're in America or France or wherever, it feels very grounded. It feels like it's from somewhere. It feels it is, but sometimes names can get lost, and I think Lincolnshire Poacher feels quite agricultural and grounded, and it reflects where we're from. We're proud yellow bellies. We're proud to be Lincolnshire, so why not shout about it?
Yeah, and let's be honest, we always like the idea of to be a poacher. We want to be out with a gun and the dog in the dusk after a couple of the landlord's pheasants. Anyway, so you're back then, or rather your dad and your brother are, and they decide, well, I mean, they got to choose cheese at that point, or Simon does. What happens to bring what is basically a cheddar route into Lincolnshire?
So Simon he liked hard cheese. So just as a human being, he liked hard cheese, and so that he was just drawn to that naturally, which I think is a really good idea. And he visited various cheddar makers, and then he went to visit a guy called Dougal Campbell, who was making an Alpine style cheddar in West Wales. And Dougal had learnt his cheese making in the Swiss and French Alps, and so I think he brought their little tendencies to his cheese. And so when Simon Dougal got on really well when Simon made cheese with him. And so literally on the very first day, Dougal drove over from West Wales. He had a little Schweppes tonic bottle with some rennet in. He had a sachet of starter, and they made cheese together. Simon had the milk and the kit, and that was it. So yeah, it was.
So he was winging it, like so many people do. But
when you start, you're trying to learn about your milk and your situation, and you don't know how that's going to pan out, and it's a journey, and it's still a journey for us. We've changed the cheese masses over the years, and we're still, and that's part of the joy of, it sounds so cliche, but it's part of the joy of making cheese is you never know it all. And things keep changing. You're making a vintage every day. The milk changes every day. The fat protein changes every day. So you're learning all the time. You've got to be willing to learn all the time, I think.
I always say that the wine guys have it easy. They do one bottling a year and hang their hat on it and say, "Isn't that clever?" And you cheese boys are making a bottling every day. And every single time it changes with the weather, with the season, whatever. With a butterfly banks its wings in Brazil, and you've got to make a new cheese. So I want to delve into, before we start eating the cheese, which I'm really keen to do, because you're on record as saying it's got its Alpine influences, that it's if I can paraphrase, cheddar with Alpine influences is sort of where you're at. What are Alpine influences? What are they in the make? What are they in the taste? What do you mean by that?
Well, I sort of ultimately, from a consumer's point of view, if you're eating it, you get with Alpine cheeses, they tend to be that slightly drier, slightly smoother texture. You tend to get the nutty sweet notes. I mean, Conte would be the perfect example. Conte is very sweet, uber sweet, and you get lots of those nutty flavors often with it. And so I think you don't always get it with our cheese, but you certainly get it with the texture, that smoother texture. And I think you often get those nutty, fruity, floral, fruity notes with it. You don't, whereas the cheddars tend to be more brothy and beefy and meaty, and I mean a lot of other things. But that's it in a simple way. But
and how do you get them? What are you doing when you're in your dairy to get those to happen?
So we use very little starter culture. So all cheesemakers acidify the milk, obviously, when they're making the cheese. And when we started, we followed exactly to Dougal's recipe, and he was using quite a lot of starter. And what the starter drives the acidification of the milk. So you're doing a rapid acidification, and we over the years have slowed that acidification down. So we add less, because there's natural bacteria in the milk doing that anyway. So we add less.
You're a big raw milk fan. I mean, that's very important to what you do.
Yeah. Well, it's key. I think for us, it's key. Literally this morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, the cows were milked. That warm milk gets pumped fresh into the vat, and it's still alive. It's still awake. And when you taste fresh, sweet raw milk straight from the cow, it tastes slightly sweet. It's like sort of liquid ice cream. And the analogy I always give is, if you go and pick a carrot from the garden and you put it in the pot and you eat it, it tastes different, very different from what you would get in the supermarket, because it's still alive. It's still, everything's still there. And raw milk is exactly the same. So we're very keen. So we always use at least half the milk. I mean, we just use a day's milking. So this afternoon's milk gets cooled down, and then that is added to tomorrow morning's milk, which goes in fresh and warm. It's absolutely key for us.
So I'm gonna paraphrase a bit. So what you're basically doing is doing as little interruption to the natural acidification of the milk as possible. You're boosting it a bit with starter.
We get it going. We wake it up, and then we're allowing the milk to speak. And I think the cheese we make now, compared to the cheese we made 20 years ago, I think we get less of a starter flavor with our cheese, and I think we get more of the milk flavor. And I think particularly with our better cheeses, I mean, So each day's make, as you're alluding to, each day's make is different. So the speed of acidification will be different each day. And on the days where it's a really nice slow acidification, slow make, we tend to get those really those long, luscious, rich dancing flavors that we're looking for. Whereas our quicker cheeses tend to have a bit more bite, a bit more edge, but the flavor will die off more quickly. And we prefer those longer flavors that have a bit more depth and complexity. That's what we're really looking for, so that you can still taste it minutes down the line.
All right, okay, it's time for cheese.
Okay.
We've got some questions. Are you supposed to eat the rind from Alison? Let's get to them. Let's go. Are we supposed to eat the cheese first? So I have been lucky enough. You sent me 3 different ages: your poacher, your vintage, and your double barreled. Now I remember when I came to visit you, you don't even grade your cheeses. You just sort of lock them up and let them go. Is that right?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, most cheddar makers would taste at 3, 6, 9, 12 months and tinker with the recipe through the year. We prefer to trust the make, and if the make's right, the cheese tends to be right. And it's just what we've always done. So we taste the cheese first of all. I mean, at the moment we're tasting cheese at 15, 16 months. We don't alter the make. We alter the make according to what's happening with the milk, not according to what's happening with the flavor of the cheese. So
vintage is what age?
Well, the vintage at the moment is close to 24 months. The poacher is sort of 18 to 21. I mean, this one is actually 22 months. And the double barrel, this particular batch is 3 years old.
Now, I'm going to come on to that because I remember you telling me some story which amused me. But so basically, we've got pre-COVID cheese, PC.
I know.
That's exciting. No one can even remember that now. But let's tuck in.
Yeah, cool.
So you've got one of the most. My camera is making my cheese disappear, which is it's not my stomach. They're doing that, but this is one of the most distinctive rinds in all of cheesemaking in the UK.
There you go. How about that? It gets. I mean, so the rind does vary a bit week by week, month by month, but you tend to get this leopard skin sort of effect.
Yeah. Distinctive orange and brown mottling.
Yeah, so we don't use cloth bandages and lard. The cheddar makers are constrained by the history and tradition of making cheddar, and they use lard and cloth bandages to protect the cheese. And because we're making a modern equivalent, we use a Dutch product that they use in Holland called Plasticoat, which has got a terrible name, but it does a brilliant job. And you paint it on the outside, so it's not edible. But it allows the cheese to breathe and dry out. So we lose about 10% of the weight of the cheese in the store. So it's still maturing as it should do, but it protects it really well. So we don't tend to get the blue. So
I'm going to interrupt you there, Tim. James Lambie's been eating your rind gaily. I'm only assuming that he's not in trouble. It's edible but not digestible. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we don't recommend eating it. I know of people who do eat it, but we don't recommend it. But good on you, James.
Okay, so it's got this kind of breaky uppy edge, which you can see there, which is very distinctive, and the colouring, which is very exciting. And the other thing that I always think you can tell, you call your older cheese double barrel, you've got more of a barrel shape around the edge.
So this particular one is from a smaller cheese. So we make a few most days. We'll make a few 8-kilo cheeses, but most of our cheeses are 20 kilos. So but also what tends to happen with these double barrels when we're selecting cheeses with a slightly softer body, so that they tend to blow a bit. They tend to bow a bit. Whereas our normal standard cheeses tend to be a bit more up and down. I mean, they do all bow a little bit, but
your cheeses always bow compared to cheddars.
Yes,
cheddars are much more upstanding.
Cloth bandages keep it in line, whereas ours sort of, they're allowed to go where they want to go. So if you don't drive, they tend to be the ones where we're not able to drive the moisture out in the make, so they tend to be a bit wetter and a bit more bowed. Which one are you eating there?
I'm still on your poacher. So I'm going in for a smell. So you do have a dry sweet note. Trying to sort of. You said bandages. It sort of makes me think of bandages. It's almost like plaster cast, if that makes sense, or a newly drying pasta.
Yeah, or it's a slightly musty note on the rind, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
as
but
you'd
it's slightly...
woody. You're going to go woody. I'm going maybe slightly yeasty.
Yeah, I would go with the yeasty more than woody.
Okay.
It's got a warm flavour. It's got a beery smell, is what it is.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of beery smell. A warm beer, and it breaks sort of like cheddar. That's what you'd expect sort of cheddar to do, roughly speaking.
Yeah, we tend to get these fissures, these cracks in the cheese. So that's pretty usual to see those when you buy our cheese.
And if you're going in to see, I don't know, a chef or I don't know, anybody who knows what they're talking about from a taste perspective but doesn't know your cheese, what is it that you say your cheese tastes of?
We call it Alpine. It tends to be nutty, but you see, we get savoury flavours. So sometimes you'll get those brothy, beefy, meaty, umami notes, but you also can get, I mean, the very best cheese we make tend to have a bit of both. So they tend to have that sweetness, but also that meaty, savoury flavour, and that tends to drive the flavour along. What you don't tend to get with our cheese is that sort of edge, that slightly bitter acid edge. And we get acidity in the cheese, obviously, but we don't. And we occasionally get slightly over acid cheeses where it is a bit bitey and a bit zingy, but we tend not to get those flavours. We tend to get the more rounded, longer. We're looking for length and depth of flavour. So our very best cheeses have that lovely long dancing flavour that stays with you, changes through its life, but it's with you a long time.
Because I'm tasting this, and I sort of feel there are two phases of it. When I haven't chewed it very much, and I've not got much saliva in my mouth, I feel it tastes more cheddary. And then as you chew it and you get more moisture in the mouth, it becomes much more creamy, and those sweet, nuttier flavors coming out. So it's almost like it's expressing the two sides of its personality in the time it's in your mouth. But
it's every batch varies. Now, I haven't tried this batch before. I have tried it before today, but I'm trying it for the first time now today. And what I like about it is a nice slow build. So you have to wait patiently, and it's coming, and it's coming, and it's not the biggest flavor. It could, if I was being critical of that, I could say it could have a bit more to it, but it's a real eating cheese. It's a cheese to go back to.
I have what I call my right hand rule. What does your hand do when you're not paying attention, when you're drinking or talking, whatever? But I'm finding it's just dipping back in here on a regular basis. So am I eating the same batch as you? Do you know if I am or I'm not?
That was made on the 26th of June, 2019. So we're talking 22, give or take.
I've got the 6th of July.
Oh, pardon me. I thought I'd picked the same batches. Well, that's a mistake of mine. Oh, well, I'm not on the same batch.
Hang on, I must be picking up the wrong one there. That's all right. That's the best before. Pardon me. 26th of June.
There we go.
Batch code.
So it's made in 2019. So you need to look at the batch code.
Okay, batch code 260625.
But that was made in 2019, 2 years ago.
Well, that's an interesting people for people watching, that you can tell when it was made off the back of a Lincolnshire Poacher packet. Is that always there for people to see?
So the day and the month will be, so it'll be roughly 2 years old, or just under, or just over, and the day and the month will tell you when in the year it was made. So that was summer cheese. So it's got some summer notes to it, hasn't it?
It does have some summer notes. I'd agree with that.
Super surprised that's the middle of summer. Summer cheese.
Okay, that's quite exciting. All right, where are you taking us next, Tim?
So let's go vintage next.
Okay.
So this was made, it's only fractionally older. See, with the age of the cheese, it's people go, Poacher's younger and more gentle supposedly, and vintage is older and stronger, but it's not always that. It's about the Poacher actually tends to have a bit more cut through. That particular batch doesn't have as much cut through necessarily, but it tends to be a bit more cut through. The vintage tends to have a bit more depth of flavor, and it's the ones we particularly like. So this was made 28th of May 2019, so 23 months old.
It's completely different.
Yeah, a month apart. Yeah,
okay.
Different texture.
It's got different texture, but it hasn't got any of those kind of and I mean this in a nice way, it hasn't got so many of those savory agricultural notes, at least not in the first half of the flavor. They did come up in the second, actually. It's a sort of farmyardy finish.
What's interesting there, what's coming from me now is a little bit of a not a bite, but I've got top of the palate and my tongue. I've got a little bit of sort of what I would call hot. That's slightly. Well, that's how I would describe that. Which is very different from the other one. I mean, if anything, yeah, very different.
It's got almost like a tomato note, like a green tomato note.
Yeah, that's very different. I mean, for me, that's not as I got more alpine notes in. This is sort of slightly counterintuitive, but I got slightly more alpine notes in the first one. I get less alpine in the second one in the vintage.
I got more notes full stop in the Poacher. This one has kind of a narrower, more distinct.
I mean, so normally that would be the other way around. There you go. It's the joy of making cheese. The other one is more imbalanced. This one's actually got that little edge through it, but that's a cheese that people will really like because it's got that little kick, that little sort of edge running. So it's definitely a style of cheese that people like, that appeals to people.
But in terms of length, I mean, I don't want to be rude about anybody's cheeses, but I'm thinking the first one had double the length of the second.
Absolutely double the length. Yes. And do you know, I'm going to be totally honest with you. If I was doing that blind, I would say the first one was vintage and the second one was Poacher. but you know what's interesting is when you taste. So we'll taste 20 batches in a row, and you calibrated on what you're tasting at that time, and so inevitably that moves up and down depending on what you're tasting. And you know I totally agree with you. The first one is a better example of our cheese than the second one. The Poacher is a better example.
Interesting.
That would always be the case.
There's comments saying that Lincolnshire Poacher and tomatoes are passionate lovers. They do go together. So you know.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So now we've got the double barrel.
Yes.
Which is your So this is a 3-year cheese.
This just under 3 years. It's been made in a slightly smaller cheese, and we're going to have a go at it.
So, is anybody else making 3-year cheese in the UK, to your knowledge?
There will be, but I don't know. Gosh, and that's really interesting. Yeah, immediately savoury, and again, very different. You know, 3 totally different cheeses.
It's much more alpine in character. It's got a distinct fruity note. In fact, I'm staying on the tomato theme. It's almost like got a ketchup note, kind of.
Yeah, nice work. Nice work.
Lovely texture, the way it breaks in the mouth. I really like that. And you would expect this cheese, because of its 3-year nature, to have the biggest, boldest flavor. It does not.
No. It's still pretty refined. Yeah, I mean, what tends to happen is if you get that cut through, our cheese needs selling young, because that it can start to take over. So we tend to sell those edged cheeses younger, and the better the cheese, generally, it's a little bit like good red wine. The better the cheese, the longer it'll keep. You know, that's certainly true in our case.
That's really interesting. I think that's. I'm going to leave it at the vintage for this comparison. It seems to be a bit of an outlier from even your perspective.
Yeah, it is. I'm surprised.
But what I'm tasting here is the clear, your early one, your Poacher is of the cheddar school, if I can put it that way, or got 1.5 feet in cheddar and half a foot in alpine, whereas your double barrel is 1.5 feet in alpine and a half a foot in cheddar.
And that's, it's part of the joy of what we do. Is it's not an exact science. The milk is living, breathing. It's moving all the time. And the skill of the cheesemaker is to judge the curd on that day and get the numbers right. But I mean, today the cows went out the first time, dancing in the fields, whatever. So they've been in all winter, and the milk in a couple of days or 3 days will start to suddenly change. So we'll get much more activity. We'll need less starter culture because we've got more live bacteria in the milk, and maker, John and Simon, or whoever's in there, will have to adjust the make to manage
or guide it in a different way.
It's a really tricky time, particularly when the cows go in. Actually, it's even harder when they go out. We tend to get our lovely particularly alpine. We get a really nice run of alpine cheeses from now for the next month or 6 weeks. So our mid-late April and the whole of May, as long as it's not a wet May, tend to be our best cheeses, what we would consider our best cheeses.
So that's interesting. So to the degree your cheese's seasonality, you pick out this period as being the purple patch of your year.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's inexact, and you can taste the cheese in the middle of winter and go, gosh, that tastes very summery. But if you were to try and guarantee a really good run of consistent cheeses with lots of depth of flavour, etc., you'd probably go for this from the last 2 weeks in April, first 2 weeks in May. Typically,
so keeping a cheese for 3 years is expensive.
Yes.
And I remember hearing from your own mouth, so it had better be true, that you lost a pallet of cheese in your store one time and found it sometime later.
Well, yes, sort of. So we had this. It's happened a couple of times where I don't know whether we've lost the cheese, but we've had cheeses that were not right at a certain age, and thought probably we were going to end up having to can, and then you come back to it much later, like 3 years. And I don't know what it is about our recipe or our milk, but it's very forgiving. And there's always a point on the spectrum that you go, and it might not be a stellar cheese, but there's always a point at which it finds its feet. It's like sometimes they're like difficult adolescents, and they just blossom late, or something happens, and those features early on that you thought were going to be there forever disappear, and you have a window of actually it's good cheese. So we're fortunate that happens.
Okay, I'm not sure I've got past my difficult adolescence yet, but I'm still looking forward to it. Now, I've got a question here from Savouring Bath. Now, obviously, I'm choosing this question because I know the answer. How often do you turn them when they're maturing? Tell us about flow.
What a great question. So, for the last 28 years, we have turned our cheese by hand weekly for the first month, and then monthly thereafter, 20 kilos. So we have about 14,000 cheeses on the farm. So turning them physically over once a month. So Riche, our cheese turning chap, turns 18,000 cheeses a month. But a year ago, almost to the day, we bought a cheese turning robot from Switzerland, and we have named her Florence the machine. And she is amazing. And she now goes up and down our aisles, and she literally will pick the cheeses up. She finds them with her little laser, picks them up, and flips them over and puts them back on the shelf beautifully, gently, even though it's 20 kilos. So it's revolutionary. Riche is a happy man that now he operates a machine rather than doing it himself. So it's been a really exciting journey. And if you have a look on Instagram, I'm going to put a video. I haven't done it yet. I will put a video on Instagram of Florence in the next week or so of her turning our cheese, and it's a sight to behold. She's amazing.
I think we should, and the Academy, we'd love that for training purposes as well, to show people what a machine does. So I've suddenly realized, Savouring Bath, I know you, Mike. I had forgotten your pseudonym. So thank you for the question, Mike, on that question. So the first machine in the UK was Tina Turner, down with Tom at Westcombe, and you've come in with Florence and Machine. So I think that this raises the opportunity of a Twitter name your machine storm, which I rather fancy. Rock and roll names for all UK cheese turning machines. I think that would be fantastic. Tim, we're coming to the end. I want to just throw stuff at you. You've got 1 minute to talk about your sustainability and on the whole thing, because you're big in that, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. We've done, over the last 10 or 12 years, we've done loads on the farm. We're lucky. We're on a 800-acre site. And so 10 years ago, we put up a 275 kilowatt wind turbine. So it's a sort of farm scale machine. So it's 30 meters to the hub with 50-foot blades on top. So it's 150 feet. So I'm changing from feet to meters, 150 foot tall in total. And that generates more electricity than we use in a year. So we're net exporters of electricity.
Awesome.
We put 50 kilowatts of solar panels up. We put 2 biomass boilers in. We're going to start with our latest project. Is we're going to start planting some hazel so we can harvest that and put that through the pellet boiler, the wood boiler. We've got a ground source heat pump for the office and for our packing room. So we're trying to do what we can to mitigate, the carbon that we use. So it's been exciting. Those have all been really exciting projects.
Sorry if I missed that, but have you reached net zero or have you not reached net zero?
Well, massive fan of net zero because we do stuff. We're using. How can you say net zero when you're using fuel for your tractors? It's
yeah.
But we'll go to electric vans. We'll eventually go to electric tractors. So we're working on trying to do as much as we can. We just want to be have as little impact as we can on the environment that we're using. We're just custodians for the next few years, and then someone else will take it on.
And the next generation.
Next generation, we've got 7 children between us, so hopefully we can find one between us to do it.
One or two.
They're still finding their feet. They're still teenagers, so we've got plenty of time.
Right. Well, Tim, we could talk all day. There's a lot of stuff we didn't get onto. We didn't talk about your Lincolnshire Red. We didn't talk about your smoked.
No. Well,
we didn't even really talk about your cows, bluntly.
No,
so, can I invite you back? I don't know, sometime later in the year or whatever, and we'll hear more about your awesome cheese making journey and the family and all that.
Yeah, definitely. I can't believe that's been half an hour. It's gone really quickly.
It's gone really quickly. Well, it's great to chat. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who's watching, for all your comments. I see there's been quite lively chat there. And for us at the Academy of Cheese, from Tim up in Lincolnshire, and from all cheese lovers everywhere, good night to you all.
Thank you, guys.